This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The latest in the fight to contain the coronavirus, with at least 68 deaths in 6 countries outside China. 2 South African crew members of a cruise ship in Japan test positive for COVID-19 as Nigeria confirms its first case. And the WHO launches an appeal for $40 million to tackle Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour, South Africa to lose tariffs on $4.5 billion worth of imports once the Africa Continental Free Trade Deal kicks in. And in sport, Soweto Giants, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates face off in a PSL decider on Saturday. We begin with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak, which has been reported on all continents except Antarctica. Belarus has just reported its first case. The patient is an Iranian who arrived from Azerbaijan last week. In China, over 300 new cases were reported on Thursday, a record low for the month of February. The majority of new infections are in Hubei province, where the outbreak began. China's total number of infections now stands at close to 79,000 cases. About 46% have recovered, while more than 2,700 have died. Guangdong, Zhejiang and Henan are the next worst hit provinces. Each has more than 1,200 cases. Outside of China, 51 countries have reported a total of over 4,400 cases. South Korea has confirmed over 2,000 infections, including over 300 new cases. Italy has the largest tally outside Asia with over 600 cases. Iran is the worst hit country in the Middle East with 245 confirmed cases and the most number of deaths outside of China. Japan has more than 900 cases. Now, an official with the Chinese embassy in Kenya and CGTN's chief anchor Beatrice Marshall joined a panel discussion on Switch TV's new talk show called The Tipping Point. The discussion was focused on the partial resumption of flights to and from Kenya by China Southern Airlines. Councillor Wang Xiuzheng reassured the Kenyan public that the Chinese government has taken every measure to prevent COVID-19 from spreading to Kenya.
Actually, the Chinese embassy in Kenya actually attached reporting to the control and prevention of the virus. So as for the question, actually all the Chinese passenger coming on the plane from China has gone through many steps of the check before they arrived here in Kenya. For example, when they leave their living community, they have the temperature check. As we know, I'm not an expert, but I know the 2 main symptoms of this infection. One is high temperature. The second is the cough. Cough you can watch, right? You can notice. But for temperature is the main measure to check. So first, when they leave their living community, they get the temperature check, and then they take the public transport between cities. They have another step to check. I mean the temperature check, and then when they arrived at the airport, the departure hall, again the temperature check, and before departure, before boarding, once again, and also on the plane, as we required. Actually, it had been always happening. The plane had been equipped with the medical supplies and sanitizing supplies all the way. And when they arrived here in Kenya, as far as I know, so 3 steps of the temperature check will be done for the passengers. We are keeping very close contact with the Kenya government, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, for example, just now we talked about the passenger, the plane of the passenger. Actually, for your government, your immigration knows all the list of the passengers, and also we have the list of Chinese national on this plane. But under the premise of protection of the privacy, we because we have the direct contact with the with the Chinese national here, we exchange information. If if there are any cases or suspicious cases reported.
Nick and Tamima, first of all, last time I was here, I was speaking to my civic duty, and I was quite radical. You know, I'm a radical left politician.
Okay.
At the same time, I was criticizing the Chinese government and the lifestyle and other stuff, but I was also sympathetic last time with the Chinese people. You remember when Kenya is part of the global order, we are part of the global community. We've called the community of nations, and therefore we should be naturally sympathetic to the Chinese for the epidemic that is happening in their country. Secondly, since we adopted the policy of look east, as Beatrice has said, the trade between Kenya and China is increasing that compared to any other country in the world. Therefore, we cannot avoid movement of people and goods from China to Kenya and vice versa. Therefore, it is something that when you are asking the question about self-quarantining for the people who came in Kenya, it is a question that is speaking to the fears among Kenyans that if somebody who is tested positive comes in, and then this person, maybe by accident, of course, the disease is spreading at a very fast rate. Then it infects and it spreads. What is the state of preparedness of the country to handle such cases of emergency? And this is something that we discussed at length last time when we had this discussion. So I think basically it is an issue that is speaking to the fear among Kenyans and whether the government is prepared. But I like the fact that he has mentioned about the issues of the test and the various issues that are being, the procedures before boarding, something that is very important. I want to emphasize that the government should be able to come up with its own screening at the points of entry, the ports of entry, across the country, especially through the main airport in JKIA. That is the only way. But the issue of self-quarantining cannot work best before the government itself puts the screening mechanism at the points of entry. In fact, if we had capacity, the Kenyan government should have sent the expertise. It's only that we don't have those kind of experts because this is a new disease that has come out. Just like Ebola, we should have even sent expertise to go and assist the Chinese. I think it's something that we need to ponder.
The information is out there. We have information from the World Health Organization. We have information from Chinese authorities who issue daily pressers, who issue daily updates. Today we were told about the number of people in total who have been infected. We are seeing a total openness, right? But it is the age of social media, you know, and so in this age of social media, sometimes by the time a story gets to a certain level, it has completely metamorphosized and changed. So we want to use data to open minds. So let's use data to open minds here. Now, globalization. We start with globalization. Globalization is a phenomenon now. You know, there's a lot of movement from here to China, from China to Africa. The African Union itself estimates that there are 600% flight increases over the last 10 years as a result of the trade that Africa does with China. So the world is moving, the globe is moving, trade has to continue, people have to move. You're asking, was this a right move by China? Absolutely. The World Health Organization itself, and it is both China and Kenya, the World Health Organization itself has said that there is no need for restriction of flights. Think about it. It is not time for isolation. It is time for solidarity. If we are all, as a global audience, if we are to kick the epidemic, we must stand together in solidarity, not isolating, not saying we cannot go there or they cannot come here. And I'll pose this question to you as well. How would you feel about the Africans who are constantly locked out of Europe and, you know, have to go through the Mediterranean Sea to reach the other end? Thousands are dying each year as a result. So I say it is time for solidarity. It is not time for isolation.
Now, the South African government says let's head to some news coming from Japan now. At this stage, it appears that we are looking at about 900 cases in Japan. And let's bring you more on that. We're joined by CGTN's Terashima. He's live with us from Japan's capital of Tokyo. Terence, we know that the total number of cases now appears to be in the region of 900. Just talk us through what the Japanese government is doing. We understand that schools have been closed, but what more is being done to fight the spread of COVID-19?
Yes, Japanese government has been rather slow in reacting to the spread of the virus. It was somehow concentrating on the Diamond Princess while the virus was spreading in Japan. After some debate in the ministries and the government, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe requested all cultural and sports events to be postponed or cancelled earlier this week for 2 or 3 weeks, and also requested elementary, junior high school and high schools to be closed. Closing of schools have caused anger amongst the parents. Abe said it was to prevent from clusters of people of spreading the virus in schools and in facilities and in companies. But they had no prior warning, and working parents are unable to take care of their young kids at home while they're working, and some have to take leave from their kids, and some schools are not prepared because it was an exam or a graduation season as well, and especially medical workers can't leave their work to go to be at home. And so there's been a lot of oppositions, and district governments have opposed the move and decided, some decided not to follow, some decided to delay after graduation seasons, etc. But government is basically asking people to stay at home and asking companies to allow employees to work from home. And this is, at the moment, is the government measures to contain the virus in Japan.
Well, Terence, we know, of course, as you mentioned, that the focus had initially been primarily on the Diamond Princess cruise ship. But it seems now what's emerging as a new concern are cases that cannot be traced to the Diamond Princess ship or to any particular place of origin. Just talk us through those types of cases and what's happening in that regard.
Yes, originally some of the cases were related to a close contact with foreign nationals, inbound tourists into Japan, such as tour bus drivers, etc. But there have been a number of cases where, such as in northern Hokkaido, there was an isolated town. However, they have more than 20 contracting the virus. So experts say it is trucking sources is over. It is the transition stage where containing the virus is more important. However, a lot of the public with showing symptoms and fever would not be allowed to take the test unless they fit the government criteria. Such as 37.5 degrees temperature for at least 4 days, and had contact with those with fever or have gone abroad. And some were only tested after getting critical. So doctors warned that these government criteria is actually reducing the number of people that contracted virus. They only test like an average of 960 per day. So there are a lot of people with potentially carrying the virus still in the community without knowing that they are. So there's been a lot of criticism in that, and public are asking, and district governments are asking government to increase the number of tests so they know how, in reality, how many people have actually contracted the virus. In fact, in the last 2 days, we have over 30 positive cases and 2 deaths. Back to you.
Terence Terashima, thank you so much for that update, giving us a rundown of the situation from Tokyo, Japan. Let's turn now to Nigeria. Nigeria has just confirmed its first case of COVID-19. The patient is an Italian citizen who works in Nigeria. He returned from Italy to Lagos on the 25th of February and is said to be clinically stable with no serious symptoms. He is being treated at the infectious disease hospital in Lagos. Let's get you more details on this. We're joined by our correspondent, Deji Badmus, who is in the commercial capital of Lagos. Deji, what more do we know about this confirmed COVID-19 case in Lagos, and how are authorities handling the situation thus far?
Well, Lindy, what we know about this individual is that he's an Italian and actually works here in Lagos. He works for a company actually here in Lagos, and he came into the country, came into the city, and he took ill. And when he was rushed to the hospital, he was diagnosed that he wasn't actually diagnosed immediately. Initially, malaria was suspected, but we understand he tested negative to it, and so immediately the doctors at the hospital where he was taken to had to contact the state government after the length of the place where he was coming from, that's Italy. And so he was then transferred to the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, where a comprehensive test was now conducted for coronavirus, and this individual tested positive for it, and immediately he was transferred to the isolation facility that the state government had actually put in place in preparation for any outbreak like this. And that individual, as we speak, is at this isolation facility. He's been treated there, and what we've been told is that well, that the symptom is mild and that he's making a gradual recovery. And the authorities are saying there's no cause for alarm at all, that people do not need to panic. As a matter of fact, people had been prepared before now for a situation as this. So the authorities have said, look, everything is in place. This isolation and quarantine facility can actually take about 100 patients. And what the authorities are saying is that, look, everything is in place to ensure that this does not spread. Now, what they are going to do is to begin that difficult process of contact tracing. We understand they say they are going to contact the airlines. They will try to find out who was on that flight that actually brought this Italian into the country. So that, of course, is going to be difficult. We understand the office where this individual works has now been locked down. Contact tracing, of course, is ongoing. Efforts will be made by the health authorities here to locate everyone now that this individual may have come in contact with, and then bring them in for some kind of isolation just to prevent the spread of the virus. Lindy?
And Deji, of course, it is somewhat comforting that the government is reassuring people, saying there is no need to panic. However, what is the mood like on the ground? How have people in Nigeria responded?
Well, I can see, you don't get that sense of panic at all. People had actually been conditioned to expect something like this. The coronavirus, the news had been out there for quite a while now. So people had been conditioned for quite a while now. The government had been carrying out media campaigns to enlighten people now on the coronavirus and what they need to do to prevent contracting it. Now, what is definitely going to happen is that the government is going to intensify that campaign. And the good thing is that, look, Ebola came here in 2014, so people actually know how, some of the preventive measures now they need to take. The government is providing more education, so there's no sense of panic, and people are going about their usual businesses. Hopefully, everyone hopes that this doesn't get out of control, and that this index case that has been identified now, that there wouldn't be another case, but there's no sense of panic at all. I think we've actually not gotten to that stage. People had before now been conditioned to expect this, and I think they're actually prepared, because now people are being told to observe personal hygiene, keep some kind of 5 feet distance now. If you're coughing, for instance, make sure you cover your mouth, or make sure you observe that 5 feet distance away from people. Use hand sanitizers. I think going forward, we're going to see a more intensive media campaign, But the most difficult thing that the authorities would have to deal with would be misinformation on social media, as we have seen in the past. So that is a battle the authorities would have to wage, and I want to believe they'll be prepared for it. So going forward, we expect to see intensive media campaign educating people on the virus now and how it can be contracted, and how people can actually prevent, observe that precaution now to ensure they don't contract the virus.
Thank you so much. Deji Bedmus reporting to us there from Lagos on Nigeria's first confirmed case of COVID-19. Now, turning to news coming from South Africa, the South African government says 2 South African crew members of the cruise ship Diamond Princess have tested positive for coronavirus. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases says the 2 are currently being treated in Japan and are in good care. Let's go live to our reporter, Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg for more. Angelo, just tell us what more information has emerged about these South African crew members who've tested positive for COVID-19.
Well, look, earlier this morning, as you said, those authorities here in South Africa got confirmation that there were, in fact, 12 South African crew members working on board the Princess Diamond cruise ship when it was affected by COVID-19. South African authorities are now saying that they were informed on Wednesday, that's the 27th, by the Japanese health authorities that 2 of those, in fact, had tested positive for the virus, and they're currently being treated, as it were. So we're watching what's going on right now. The latest reports do indicate that they are asymptomatic at the moment. Those 2 South African citizens, of course, will be treated in Japan until they're fully recovered and no longer contagious before they're going to be allowed to travel. For the remaining 10, they will be permitted to disembark the ship as per instructions from their employer after they test negative for the virus. We understand, though, that they will be subjected to another 14 days of quarantine in Japan and then tested again to determine if they'll be cleared to travel or not. These measures are considered necessary for public safety, of course, and that's because there's significant exposure to the virus on board of the cruise ship. We have reached out to the NICD, which is the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, to find out if those 10 will be subjected to more quarantine procedures if they return to South Africa or not. So we haven't heard from them yet, but South Africa is on high alert for the virus at all ports of entry, and they have teams in place, that's the Department of Health, and they're monitoring passengers and returning citizens. And to date, no confirmed cases of the virus, despite 133 people being tested locally, 89 of whom met with the case definition for people under investigation for COVID-19. That's all we have for now.
Thank you so much. Angelo Coppola live with us there from Johannesburg. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's coming up.
ECOWAS heads of state are planning a trip to Guinea in hopes to calm the waters ahead of Sunday's referendum. I have more for you. I'm Phil Ihaza in Abuja, Nigeria.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The World Health Organization has launched an appeal for $40 million to tackle the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The global health body says the funds it currently has will run out at the end of this month. The appeal comes as authorities record a dramatic reduction in new Ebola cases. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports from the DRC's capital, Kinshasa.
Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo have dropped significantly over the past 2 months. No new case was recorded last week in North Kivu province, one of the epicenters of the outbreak. But healthcare workers are not celebrating yet.
The number of cases are decreasing, but we cannot say that we are already control Ebola. We still have now we are already spent 8 days without cases, but we know that you have to spend 42 days without cases, and even after this you have to reinforce surveillance in this area.
That surveillance now hangs in the balance with the reported shortage of funds. The WHO recently made an appeal for $40 million for operations aimed at ending the disease.
The last Ebola response plan, which covered the period from January to June, yes, you call it 4.1 Ebola response plan. This response plan are not yet totally covered financially. Yes, it is why the government, the W.H.O, launched this appeal to mobilize the resources.
The European Union has committed to support efforts of ending the outbreak. Health officials have attributed the reduction in new Ebola cases to the change in the attitude of community members. In 2018, health workers battling the disease faced a lot of hostility from the locals.
Many of our people died of Ebola because they refused to heed the instructions of health workers. If we had followed the example of people in Mangin, many of our colleagues would still be alive.
Insecurity in the east of the country is one of the biggest challenges that healthcare workers are now facing.
The World Health Organization has expressed fears that its operations in North Kivu and Ituri province could be halted due to the lack of funds. And that could lead to a spread of Ebola at a time when cases are at an all-time low. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Heads of state from the Economic Community of West African states are due to travel to Guinea to meet with President Alpha Conde ahead of Sunday's referendum. Guinea has been plunged into a political crisis over the president's push for constitutional reforms, which, if successful, could see him extend his tenure by another 10 years. The opposition says it will boycott Sunday's vote. Just in recent weeks, several protesters have died in various anti-government demonstrations. Well, CGTN's Phil Ihaza has been keeping an eye on the story for us. He now joins us live from Abuja, Nigeria. Phil, tell us, what are ECOWAS heads of state hoping to achieve with this visit to Guinea?
Well, thank you. Well, it is expected that the heads of state, the delegation from the ECOWAS region, will be looking to exert pressure on the current president, Alpha Conde, to see how he can pave way, step aside and pave way for elections to occur in the country, for the democratic process to deepen and grow in the country. And of course, more importantly, to see how that a peaceful transition can occur between the current president and the opposition party, because we've seen cases where most similar situations, the president or these kind of presidents who are holding on to power will not want to let go of it, because there are fears that there will be, probes and hauntings of all sorts to ensure that some of the past incidences of the president are, brought to bear. So the heads of state will be looking at two parts. First, to, of course, restore peace and calm in the political process in the country, and, of course, a peaceful transition of power, as the case may be in the future.
And Phil, how much success has ECOWAS had in the past with interventions into political crises when it comes to other member countries?
Well, the West African bloc, which comprises of countries in member countries in West Africa, they've actually done quite a huge they've done a lot to see how that they can restore peace in countries in this region. There are several incidences you can recall in 2015 in Burkina Faso where a coup was threatening the political stability of the country, but the intervention of the West African leaders led by Senegal, Benin Republic and Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, they intervened and stopped that coup from occurring, and of course peace was restored, calm was restored. There's also the popular one in Gambia in 2017 where Yahya Jammeh was given an ultimatum to step aside and hand over power to Adama Barrow, who is now currently the president. So we've seen cases like this oftentimes when the ECOWAS steps in, and then more recently in Guinea-Bissau, where in fact the outgoing president Jose Marivaz is going to be handing power over, or rather has handed over power to his successor, that's Umbaro, and he even paid a visit to Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari recently, thanking him for his intervention, and of course the regional leaders in ECOWAS in that situation where there was a political crisis and refusal to hand over power. But we're seeing the ECOWAS step in these countries. So definitely there is a positive undertone in this trip to Guinea to see how they can restore peace in that country.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. He has live with us there from Abuja. Let's now turn to Somalia, where the Locust invasion continues to wreak havoc there. Somalia was the first country to be hit by the devastating pests that are now plaguing a number of East African countries. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports from Mogadishu on the effect of the desert locust infestation and government's efforts to combat it.
Lul Abdi is inspecting her farm on the outskirts of Beledweyne in central Somalia. In December, a swarm of locusts destroyed crops in her farm and many others across much of the country, as a locust invasion continues to cause concern in most East African countries.
A swarm of locusts ate all our crops. All the cost, maintenance, and a month's hard work went in vain. Tomatoes, oranges, maize, beans, all destroyed. We are appealing for assistance from all parties in order to tackle the locusts before the harvest season.
Not far from Lul's farm, we meet Qasim Abdi, who is concerned of a possible infestation by desert locusts that left behind millions of eggs from the previous wave.
Last year, flood waters destroyed our farms and seedlings. After flood water subsided and we planted again, locusts invaded our farms and ate all the crops we planted, including maize, pepper, and sesame. We are going to plant again, but we are extremely worried.
Somalia became the East African state to declare a national emergency over a locust upsurge which is spreading in the East African region and beyond. Experts say locust poses a major threat to the country's already fragile food security situation. Mogadishu says it has put in place mechanisms to ensure a possible second wave doesn't cause much damage to farmers and pastoral communities.
In the near future, we're expecting the arrival of high-tech equipment, better than the manual ones we've been using. Some will be portable, mounted on vehicles. We are also expecting aircrafts to spray and reduce the impact of desert locust infestation.
Earlier this month, officials from the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization appealed for up to $76 million to address the crisis in Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia.
If the locust does hit cropping areas or grazing areas at the worst time, the damages can be huge, up to 100%. We are appealing jointly for funding. This is not just a problem for Somalia, it's a problem for the region. So what we do in Somalia benefits to the neighboring country and vice versa.
Somalia recently joined the Desert Locust Control Organization. It's now hoping to receive technical assistance as it battles its worst locust invasion in decades. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, as we heard there, Somalia and much of East Africa, as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo, are battling this desert locust invasion, and fears are growing that even if swarms move on, they could return with the coming of the rains. Well, to understand what is happening here, we do have in studio with us Dr. Ongamo George Otieno, an agricultural entomologist at the University of Nairobi. Dr. Otieno, thank you so much for your time. In very simple terms, please just explain to us why these locusts are invading these particular areas at this particular time.
Thank you for inviting me to the studio. Desert locusts multiply in numbers. The populations we have currently in Kenya are the individuals that swarm from Somalia and Ethiopia. These individuals built their populations in this area as a result of individuals that swarmed in from Yemen. So the control could have done in Yemen, which is traditionally done by the desert control organizations that serve different regions in Africa. In Eastern Africa, we have Desert Locust Control Organization for Eastern Africa.
I see. And so you're basically saying that they've spread all the way from Yemen through East Africa and are now even going to Democratic Republic of Congo. What is it going to take to stop these desert locusts?
Well, there are different approaches that can be used to suppress these populations. Individuals that came in from neighboring countries, that is Ethiopia and Somalia, were immature individuals. That is, in terms of reproduction, they were not yet ready to reproduce. These individuals matured in the country, though the bulk of it they were killed. Now, when they matured, they identified potential breeding areas where they laid their eggs. Now, these eggs have hatched. So the control could have been done when we had mature individuals, which a good number of swarms that came in were killed. Now, to ensure that they don't cross over to the neighboring countries as in Uganda, DRC, they ought to have been killed from the Aborigine home, that is Yemen. But now that they are here, we need to suppress the hoppers that have emerged from the eggs that were all deposited here.
I see. Now, East African populations, and this is a question that many Kenyans and Ugandans have been asking, East African populations are no strangers to eating grasshoppers and locusts. What about these ones? Can they be eaten?
Yes, they can be eaten, but the fear is these insects, given that they are destroying vegetations, they are destroying crops wherever they are coming from, there are different interventions to suppress their populations that have been initiated. Now, these wild ones, we don't know the kind of chemicals they've been exposed to. As much as we want to eat them, we are not sure of our safety. So it is advisable just to stay away from them. As much as we eat locusts, we eat grasshoppers, these desert locusts, we don't know where they are coming from. If at all we have to eat desert locusts, then let us establish colonies and ensure that they feed on the right plants that we are sure of in terms of the toxicity of those plants. We cannot just eat wild insects flying all over the place.
Good advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Otieno. Joining us here in studio, he's from the University of Nairobi. Now, time for a short break. Here's what's coming up in your business news up next. Global markets on course for the worst weekly performance since the 2008 financial crisis. And South Africa to lose tariffs on $4.5 billion worth of imports once the Africa Continental Free Trade Deal kicks in.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Countries on all continents except Antarctica have reported their first cases of the coronavirus, spooking investors who are dumping equities in expectation of a global recession. Share prices are on track for the worst week since the global financial crisis in 2008. Asian stocks tracked a plunge on Wall Street, where the benchmark S&P 500 index fell more than 4% on Thursday. Mainland China, where the virus originated late last year, reported 327 new cases, the lowest since January, taking its tally to more than 78,800 cases, with almost 2,800 deaths. 4 more countries reported their first cases, taking the number of countries outside China with infections to 55. About 3,700 cases have been reported outside China, and about 70 people have died. Countries other than China are accounting for about 3/4 of new infections. Sub-Saharan Africa has reported its first case on an Italian who landed in Lagos 3 days ago. Now, South Africa risks forfeiting tariffs on about $4.5 billion worth of goods when the continent-wide free trade agreement kicks in. Tax Commissioner Edward Kieswetter notes that of the country's imports in 2019, worth about $4.5 billion came from outside the duty-free Southern African Customs Union and the Southern African Development Community. This is expected to stop attracting duties on July 1st when the African Continental Free Trade Area is scheduled to kick in. Member states are to work towards eliminating or lowering tariffs on 90% of goods ahead of that date. The deal covers a market of 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of $2.5 trillion. ALTI is a world-leading developer of unmanned aircraft. It's a South African firm which has developed expertise in unmanned aerial vehicles, also called drones, and hybrid vertical takeoff and landing systems. CGTN's Julie Shire caught up with the company in Knysna.
While the military has long pushed growth, the hot sector is now the civilian market, with drones coming in all sorts of new shapes and sizes. And South African manufacturer ALTI is a heavyweight in the sector.
We've sold units all around the world. So we've sold Europe, we've sold South America, US, Southeast Asia. There's been a lot of sales across the world, and it's increased quite dramatically in the last year. You know, obviously people are getting to understand the product a bit better and also getting to understand drones in general a bit better.
Whether you call them unmanned aerial vehicles, miniature pilotless aircraft or flying mini robots, drones are growing in popularity, and ALTI is rapidly becoming one of the world's leading manufacturers.
Internationally, we are one of the leaders in this segment. You know, we one of few hybrid VTOL system manufacturers. It's, you know, obviously unique in the sense of the technology that we use. The VTOL vertically taking off and landing VTOL motors that's electric driven, and then the hybrid system coming into play with a combustion engine at the back that you know, works on gasoline, that gives you endurance, and endurance is our main factor.
All VTOL systems are designed and built in-house by 18 specialized staff.
We focus on three mainly. We've got a surveillance package, we've got a mapping package, and also agriculture package. So all three of these systems come with different payloads, and you know, obviously the aircraft that we manufacture is the main thing to obviously get your imagery in, but it all comes down to the payload. The payload is what actually captures that data.
South Africa is joining the recent global explosion of drone technology, and ALTI is leading the way by offering different models from $35,000 to $295,000. Julie Shire, CGTN, Knysna, South Africa.
Somalia hosted a major trade expo this month aimed at showcasing its trade potential. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports from Mogadishu.
Faisal Hawar is among participants taking part in this year's Somali trade show. The 57-year-old Somali entrepreneur has an extensive network of businesses in Africa and the Gulf states. He has returned to the country for the first time in decades, hoping to capitalize on the increasing business opportunities in the Horn of African nation.
Basically, it is a collection of all these things. Business returning back, stability coming back, and the government putting up the regulations required. So 2020 is the year of blessing for Somalia to take off, especially as far as the business and aspect is concerned.
Various sectors of the economy were represented at the Trade Expo, including agriculture, fisheries, telecom, banks, as well as oil and gas companies. Organizers say the platform offers a chance for the business community to share ideas among each other.
Our target this year was 100 companies, 20 CEOs and founders of startup companies, and 15 international investors. The expo has brought together various companies under one roof to exchange ideas. It took us up to 3 years to organize this event.
The Trade Expo is taking place at this popular beach in Mogadishu. Among the sectors attending the expo include fisheries, one of the least developed sectors of Somalia's economy, with the potential of becoming a major source of employment and revenue for the government.
Investors have been urged to capitalize on the fishing sector. The Horn of African nation has a bountiful coastline, the longest in mainland Africa. Already, with support of local initiatives, the the country has begun exporting lobsters to Gulf countries. Financial analysts say that petroleum, mining and agro-livestock industries are also key areas of investment. The country's president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, recently signed into law a petroleum bill after it received the backing of both houses of parliament.
An area that I will see low-hanging fruit for the investor is to devise and package and sort of industrializing these areas. And the economics based in agro-livestock. So anything in that arena is good. Again, if you talk about the large mega projects, and for sure petroleum law and mining, is the country is blessed with a lot of deposits of minerals, which are untapped ever, virgin, so unexploited. So that offers us a lot of opportunity for the foreign direct FDIs.
Trade fairs and expos are making a comeback in the country, with financial institutions providing loans to small business owners in a move expected to boost the Somali economy. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Time for a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, Soweto Giants, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates face off in a PSL decider on Saturday.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
In your sports news,